Question 1 on the 2016 Informatics exam is the first question from the multiple choice. A design principle that relates to the appearance of a website. So we're talking about appearance here. There are two main categories of design principles or elements, and they are, you can find them on page 204 of our book, and they are, the two main categories is functionality and appearance. So going back to here, usability comes under functionality, can't be that. Repetition is an appearance element, so we'll leave that as an if for the time being, but that's definitely an appearance principle or element. Robustness is not, that is under the functionality, and accessibility comes under functionality as well. So if we check that, usability, accessibility, and robustness is under usability. So they're all under functionality, but the appearance of something, or a design or a website in this case, is usually talking about things that you can see: alignment, repetition, contrast, space, and balance. So you'll most likely have to remember these for the exam. Question 2. Secure socket layer technologies protect data by, or SSL, protect data by encrypting data when it is stored in a web-based database. No. SSL isn't to do with storing data. B. Placing a lock symbol in the address bar of a web browser. That SSL doesn't work entirely by just simply putting a lock symbol. So it's definitely not that. Separating layers of private data from sensitive information. SSL doesn't work by, or encryption doesn't work by separating data. So that is probably not the answer either. D. Encrypting data while it is being transmitted to and from a website. That is definitely the answer, because that's how encryption and SSL works. This is how encryption works in simple terms. Say your password is hello world, it goes into an encryption algorithm with a key that encrypts it to some jargon text, basically. So when that jargon text is then transmitted over the internet to the server or the other computer, if people or hackers intercept those packets and get this garbage text, they won't know what it's for or what it's used for. They won't know it actually equals hello world. But if and when that garbage text reaches the destination or the server, it should share that same algorithm or secret key to decrypt that jargon text. So then it will be able to decrypt and see that your password is actually hello world. There's also more information on encryption on page 20. Just down here in our books, if you'd like to read a bit more about that. Question 3. The efficiency of an online transaction processing system could be evaluated by. So we're talking about the efficiency, speed, not effectiveness. Let's go to the first possible answer. Measuring the time it takes to enter a valid transaction. This is a trick, sounds like a trick question to me, because this is more along the lines of testing and not evaluation. So it is talking about time, which refers to efficiency, but I don't think it's to do with evaluation. So that's just in case, let's just have it as an if for a second. Next, B, counting the number of incorrect transactions rejected by the system. That is an effectiveness related thing. C, measuring the speed of processing an entry compared to previous methods. Measuring the speed, so we're talking about efficiency, of processing an entry compared to previous methods. This may be the answer. We'll just hang on to that one for a second, because this is talking about efficiency. It's talking about the processing of an entry, and it's talking about previous methods, which must mean they're evaluating. because that's what happens in the evaluation stage when you report on previous methods versus the new solution. D, counting the number of correctly validated entries compared to previous methods. So this is to do with effectiveness. Similarly, how B was to do with the effectiveness and not the efficiency. So, out of the two possible that we noted, measuring the time it takes to enter a valid transaction sounds more like testing, whereas we're comparing previous methods, that must be to do with evaluation. It must be C. At the start of our books, it looks at the problem-solving methodology. So reading up about or remembering the problem-solving methodology and each of its stages will be required for the exam. Coming back, question 4. Quantitative data includes data that is. Well, we need to know what quantitative versus qualitative data is. Quantitative data is easy to measure, usually numeric only, and versus qualitative, which is usually hard to measure data, such as long answers and things that you would have to codify to then graph. So, A, numeric only, yes. Let's put that as a maybe for a second. Character only, no. Character and numeric, no. Character and Boolean, no, because of character. So A must be the answer, numeric only. If we have a look in our books on page 85, we can see the characteristics of both quantitative and qualitative data. So quantitative, as I said, expressed numerically, acquired by measurement, uses scientific approach, yada yada. Versus qualitative is usually expressed in words or characters, concerned with opinions, feelings, motives, and preferences. Needs to be encoded to be analyzed, so that means needs to be codified to be able to graph and make any sense of. Question 5. Criteria that can be used to check the integrity of data include. We need to know all the things that can be categorized under checking the integrity of data or ensuring that data has integrity. So, timeliness, that is one, yes. Authenticity, that's one, yes. Relevance, that's one. And accuracy, that's one. But we have a few more that look very similar, so let's just put that one as a maybe yes and not check that one off yet. Timeliness, accountability, relevance, and accuracy. Accountability sounds a bit suspect. I don't think that is one of the categories that allow you to check the integrity of data. We can double check this in a second. Timeliness, authenticity, relevance, and acceptance. We have another suspect word here, acceptance. I don't think that's one of the integrity of data categories. Timeliness, accountability, again, referencing, that is definitely not, and acceptance. So we have 3 dodgy words here. So it looks like A makes the most sense. For more information on the integrity of data, it's in our books under page 111. Here we have the integrity of data, all the major headings and categories that come under that. So timeliness, authenticity, relevance, accuracy, so correctness, completedness, clarity, consistency. There's no accountability, there's no referencing, and there is no, there we go, to the end of here, data types. So, and there's no, what was the other dodgy one? No acceptance. So there's timeliness, authenticity, relevance, and accuracy. Question 6. High temperatures affect plant growth. What must be added to the statement above to make it a reasonable hypothesis? So we have to remember what makes a reasonable, or how to form a hypothesis, if you remember from your SAT. A subject, it's got a subject, plant growth. A variable, it's got two variables, you could argue, temperature, so the variability of temperatures, and the variability of the growth of a plant. So it's got that. So it can't be that, and it can't be that, because we need to see what we need to add to this statement. A prediction, is there a prediction? High temperatures affect plant growth. Is that more of a prediction or more of a conclusion? Sounds more like a conclusion to me. So I think this hypothesis needs a prediction. It also makes sense because a conclusion usually comes after you've tested and gathered data for your hypothesis. So for a reasonable, going back to the question, a reasonable hypothesis should include a prediction and not necessarily a conclusion. The answer is C. For more information on how and what a hypothesis is in our textbook, it is on page 75, I think. Characteristics of well, if we go back one, what is a hypothesis for starters, and then more information about and examples on what a good hypothesis would look like, and the characteristics of a reasonable hypothesis are all in this table. Question 7. Janet has been investigating the decline in sales of music CDs. She would like to create a chart for her blog that clearly shows the decline. So we can see that this is one of their requirements. Which of the following is the best chart to use? Out of the four, instantly I can see that there is a decline, some sort of decline happening here and also here. So instantly we can scrap these two. We can justify that further by saying that a pie chart doesn't show decline or a history of something over time. And this chart, even though it does have the sort of histogram type of chart showing a decline over time, it's hard, or it's unclear because of the background image. So basically, by the looks of it, this is very similar to this one, which is probably going to be our answer here. But before we confirm, let's have a look at D. D shows a decline, some sort of decline, but the X and the Y axis are not right. It doesn't show us over time along the X axis, whereas this one does. So we can clearly see from 2015 to 2013, sales went down over time. Whereas D here shows us it goes the other way, from 2015 to 2013, if we're trying to follow it this way, sales went down also, but it's going this way. And when you associate something, an arrow going up, it doesn't clearly show a decline. It's like the convention for showing a decline is a downward trend. So the answer is clearly B. Question 8. One of the provisions of the Federal Privacy Act 1988 and its amendment is to what? Permit access to the personal details of specific people? No. Prevent state and territory governments from misusing personal data? Maybe. Let's just keep that there for a second, because if we can recall that Privacy Act 1988 is to do with governments, government bodies and businesses. C is permit someone to print their own text file number provided that it is for their personal use. No, that doesn't sound right, so let's scrap that one. D, protect personal information collected and stored by federal government departments. So out of these two, B and D, it is going to be, this one sounds more reasonable. Protect personal information collected and stored by federal government departments, whereas prevent state and territory governments from misusing personal data. So this keyword here, misusing, rather than the act of storing data. That's what this Privacy Act 1988 is all about. So it is D. More information on this can be found on page 130. Here are the table summary of the legislations. So Privacy Act 1988 applies to federal government departments. Regulates handling of personal information about individuals, and so on. So in the exam, you're probably going to need to remember and recall this, which legislation applies to what and what it does not apply to, and what effect it has. Question 9. The diagram above most likely represents. Well, let's have a look at the diagram. Firstly, it is big buy, goes to download, support, contact, buy it now, products. They all sound like pages from a website. So let's go through these diagrams then. A sitemap, that's to do with a website, and it looks like a sitemap, so that's probably it. But let's check the others first. A mock-up, it's definitely not a mock-up. A mock-up is very rough and sketchy, like of single pages, usually of like layout diagrams and stuff. A storyboard is usually linear and it has page after page, and it has like more of a flow to it. So it's not a storyboard. An entity relationship diagram, that's more to do with database design. It's definitely not a database up here, so it's definitely not that. So it is a sitemap. We can have a look at those in our book. For question 9, that's 221, page 221 in our books, shows us design tools. So we have a few design tools here which you'll have to be aware of going into the exam. So the IPO charts, input, process, output, the mock-ups or annotated diagrams, which are very rough layout diagrams used in the design stage. A sitemap here, which is exactly the same as the one in this practice or the 2016 exam, nearly. Storyboards, layout diagrams, and Gantt charts. I think that's more about project management. So there you go, starting from page 220. Question 10. We have a small case study. Bentwood Softball Club needs to ensure that all of its umpires are registered to umpire games in Victoria. To do this, the club needs to record detailed personal information regarding each umpire's level of skill. Highlight that, detailed personal information. Recently, the club undertook an online survey of all of its 35 umpires. The safest way for Bentwood Softball Club to store the data from this survey is on what? So let's go through these options. The club's members-only social media page. No. An unsecured web page. No. A DVD kept on an open shelf in the club rooms. No. So this was a really easy one. A secure has to be D because all those three are. All those three options are rubbish. A secure laptop with restricted access kept in the club rooms. Yes, that's the best one out of them all. To do with question 10, we can do some reading on page 170. Data security. So physical security, software security, using strong passwords, using logins and using biometric identification, always logging out, encrypting data, using a firewall, using antivirus. So there's some good reading surrounding this topic or this question, this type of question. which you will need to know for going into the exam. Question 11, a project management Gantt chart question. That should be an easy one. For the Gantt chart shown above, a delay in the completion of task D by 1 day will what? So let's find D, and let's just draw a delay. So this will go to here and end on Sunday. Let's make the assumption, because we haven't been told anything about if they work on Saturday or Sunday. Let's just assume that they are. So that means there is a dependency. This line here means there's a dependency for basically D has to finish before F can start. So that means F can't start on Sunday because D has been pushed over to Sunday. Meaning this F needs to now start a day later. There's also a dependency here between G. G can't start before F. So that means G has to start from here and will be pushed to an extra day also. What about E? E has a dependency on F. Well, let's start with B. So it can't start until B is finished. So there's no effect on B, which means there's no effect here on E. But F has changed, and E can't start until F is completed either. But we can see here that even if F is pushed to Monday, E still starts on Tuesday. So there's no change here. So that arrow goes like that, from there to there. So knowing all this, let's go and check what the possible answers are. A, have no effect on task E. So task E is here. That's correct, but we're not sure yet, but that's definitely right. B, delay only task E by 1 day. This task E is not delayed at all from this task D being extended by 1 day. It only affects task F and task G. So it's not this one. Delayed only task F by 1 day. So task F is delayed by 1 day, but also task G is delayed by 1 day. So it's not only delaying one task. So that's wrong. D is delay both tasks E and F by 1 day. E is not delayed and F is. So that's wrong. So it must be going back to A, it must be have no effect on task E. We can find some more information on Gantt charts and project management for this question 11 on page 134 of our book. Project management, we have milestones and dependencies, processes, task identification, WBS, work breakdown structure is probably an acronym that you'll have to be familiar with. It goes all the way through this case study, I think. So just scroll through here. I'm pretty sure everyone's going to be okay with any similar questions like this, because sequencing is pretty straightforward and dependencies like this. But just to refresh your mind, go through that stuff in preparation for the exam. Question 12. In the diagram shown above, what security control is at P, so here, to ensure that the data is provided by a valid source? Let's see what's going on here. A message is going in to P, and then by the looks of it going to a web server, and the web server is shooting it back out and not going back that way, but delivering a message to probably, by looks of it, the same user or a different user, just like an instant messaging app. So what would be here in this P place? Would it be a switch? Possibly, possibly not. If we're talking about security control, does a switch provide security for this sort of flow? It does not. So let's take that one off. A firewall. Yes, that's a possible answer. Let's go through the rest. a biometric reader. When you send a message and that message is transferring over the packets, over the Ethernet cable, over optical fiber, whatever, is there a device in between you and the web server where someone has to thumbprint or have a retina scan or some sort of biometric reader? No. So that's definitely not the answer. And antivirus software. So that's interesting because you might say that yes, an antivirus should be here. But I can tell now from the two options that are left, B and D, it's definitely a firewall. And that's because an antivirus software should be installed on the local here, on the local computers here, and even on the web server you can have antivirus, some sort of antivirus software running here and checks. But in between the transfer, the packets of data, this would most likely be, out of these options, a firewall, where this message or this data, this packet of data goes in, the firewall checks it, and then either blocks it or lets it through to the web server. So it's not an antivirus software. More information on this sort of stuff and this question 12 can be found on 173 of our books, page 173. So using a firewall and the differences between using an antivirus software. And there's a little table down there that you can go through too. Question 13, database question. A dental clinic has the following table storing appointment information. The business would like to store the data in a relational database. So here we have, it looks like a flat file. Which of the following diagrams shows the data in third normal form, 3NF? Here's our first 3NF question. So this should be easy because we have some choices here. And the rule for third normal form is that every non-primary key field must relate directly to the primary key. So if we have a look at this first answer, a dentist first name and a dentist surname, they both directly relate to the dentist number. There's no other fields in here that are not relevant or not directly related to the dentist number. Here we have a few fields that have been concatenated to make a primary key for this appointments table in between. So the dentist number, the appointment date, and the appointment time all make up a primary key for each field in this table. So a patient number is directly related to all of these three in this as the primary key. The estimated duration is also directly related to the appointment. So that looks good too. There's nothing here that is not related, directly related to the primary key or the concatenated primary key. The patient, the first name and the surname are directly related to the patient. There's nothing not to do with the patient in this table or the patient number. So A actually looks pretty good so far, but let's keep it there for a second and check the rest. Here we have in the dentist table, I can see the first name and surname is still there, but we have estimated duration. If we're storing data about the dentist, what does an estimated duration have anything to do with a dentist? It has nothing to do with the dentist. This is all to do with should be to do with the appointment. So this one is wrong. So B is out already. C, so first name, surname, that's all to do with the dentist. The appointment, we have patient name, yep, that's all good. And for the patient, we have, oh, this is moved over, so the estimated duration. What the hell does estimated duration have anything to do with a patient? This has everything to do with appointments. So this is wrong. D, the last one, we have first name and surname, that looks good. Patient number, that all looks good. And we have estimated duration again. Is that a copy of the C? What's different between C and D? How do they try and trick us? Oh, they left out the patient number from here. But anyway, this is wrong because, again, estimated duration shouldn't be in patient. Estimated duration is all about appointments, or that's what we could assume from this table. Because here we have the dentist, we have a patient, and we have a table that would go in between, which is the appointments. And for the appointments, the estimated duration and appointment date and time are directly related to appointments. But the patient name is directly related to the patient, and the dentist name is directly related to dentist, the dentist number or the ID. So the answer is A. This would be the closest to third normal form for this data or this table above here. For question 13, we can look in our books on page 35, all about third normal form. The normalization process starts back here somewhere. Let's see, table normalization. So it takes you through 1 and F, 2 and F, and the rules I've highlighted here in green, which you should have done throughout the year when we first started it. But you can see here I've highlighted, to be 3 and F compliant, every field in a table must relate directly to the primary key. So that's what is happening here. Everything relates to the primary key. Question 14, information created for educating a worldwide audience about career options should be what? Age appropriate and gender inclusive. Yes, that sounds good. Appropriate for all ages and gender inclusive. That sounds even better. No, it does not. And I'll explain why very shortly after we go through these next two. Suitable for adults only and culturally exclusive. No, that is not. Definitely not what they're looking for, because we want to educate a worldwide audience. Suitable for young people only and cultural inclusive. No, because it's not necessarily suitable for young people only. So it's out of these two, and the reason why it should be one or the other is because of the wording. Age appropriate versus appropriate for all ages. And the definition is age appropriate. So in our books, which we'll scroll to in a second, it says that age appropriate is one of the points that makes something suitable for educating a worldwide audience. Not necessarily appropriate for all ages all the time, because we can cater to different audiences, but as long as it is age appropriate. So on page 186, we need to go to educating a global audience. Here are the dot points. Be gender inclusive. Yes, we had that. Gender inclusive. Be culturally inclusive. That was one of them down here, but that suitable for adults only was not applicable. Apply common language. Didn't say anything about that, but that might be on the exam. Apply common language, so just be aware of that. And be age appropriate. So be age appropriate. That's why B wasn't the answer, because appropriate for all ages versus age appropriate. So that's why it is A. A is the answer. Question 15, Greenwood Council is developing a disaster recovery plan. What is the best management strategy to enable the restoration of data quickly with the least loss of data? So the first one is implement weekly full backups. Maybe. Let's keep going. Implement only daily incremental backups. No, because incremental only backs up from the last incremental backup. It doesn't include a full backup, and you can't restore a system or data without the full backup if you're doing incremental backups. So it's not this one. Implement daily incremental and weekly full backups. That sounds like a good one. Better than probably this one, more secure than and cheaper to run than this one, I would say. Well, not cheaper to run, more efficient. In terms of the time it takes to back up and the space it's using. Or D, implement daily incremental and weekly incremental backups. No, that's the reason why I wouldn't do this one is because if we're doing daily incremental and weekly incremental, there's no full backup to restore with these incremental backups. The way incrementals work are we first need a full backup. So let's say we're backing up this box here, and any little change that we make to this box through incremental backups we record. So these little parts here that are added to this box, or that change over time, so over the week. But we can't make a full backup because this is the whole system here. We can't make a whole backup without the original full backup. So that's why this C is the best answer. We wouldn't want to make weekly full backups because then we would be making this full box, or this full box once a week. And we might lose things across the week. So all those increments, we might get to, say we do it every Friday, we might get to Thursday and have all these changes and lose all those changes because then everything would crash and then we would go to back up the next day, but there'd be nothing to back up. And we wouldn't do incremental weekly because we would just be taking these parts of the backup and not including the full backup as well. So that's why it is C. You can read up more about this on what page of our book? 284 of our book. It's already there. So we have, probably this table is the most helpful. It explains the differences between daily, weekly, differential and partial backups. So it'd be a good idea to read up on those before the exam. Question 16. A school's administration is reviewing its information management strategy based on the following criteria: security, cost, speed, speed of data retrieval, and data currency, or the currency of data, meaning timeliness, the timeliness of the data. I think that's what they're referring to. Taking into account all of the criteria above, which of the following is the best information strategy to enable the urgent restoration of data? So we need to justify which one of these we would pick based on their criteria and their order of criteria. The first column is going to be easy because they're all excellent. So it doesn't matter in terms of security. We can cross that one off. Next one is cost. So we need to value cost here. So expensive is probably going to be crossed out. Cheap, cheap, and very cheap. Well, this one looks like the one for now. So let's go with this one. So far we're on D. Next is speed of data retrieval. Quick to store and retrieve data. That sounds pretty good. So let's just read the other two before we go ahead. Slow to store and retrieve data. So it's definitely not this one. So we can probably cross out this one, and we can cross out this one without even reading the last ones. This one is very quick to store and retrieve data. So this may be it. It's going to depend probably on the last one now. Currency of data. Only current at the end of the week or current at times during the day. So it's definitely going to be this one. Because this, I'm assuming this means, say for example I'm marking the role on Compass, and if I mark the role on Compass in this scenario, you wouldn't be able to see if you were present or not for your classes until the end of the week. Whereas if I was marking the role on Compass in this scenario, you would see it at times during the day. So if I marked you present for English, session 1, you could see that straight away pretty much during the day. Whereas if I did it up here, you wouldn't see that you were absent or present until the end of the week. So the answer is definitely D, this one. And we can cross this one off. Question 16, there is some stuff you can read up on in our book on page 252. 252. So information management strategies, maximizing opportunities, just a bit of reading, minimizing risk. Going into the exam, it's probably a good idea just to note some, especially some of these dot points here. Question 17. The photograph editor for a magazine publisher is setting up a folder structure for a new project based on the following conditions. So we have a bit of reading here to do and a bit of processing in our heads. That the several photographers will be sending original photographs to the editor during the next 3 months. At the end of the project, each photographer's full set of original photos will have to be easily identified. Okay, let's mark that. The originals will never be manipulated, but will need to be archived at the end of the project. So they'll need to be stored somewhere safe and be able to be identified easily based on the photographer by the looks of it. Next major point is when a photograph is manipulated, the editor will make a copy of the original. The copy will be manipulated as needed. There may be many different versions saved. This will require daily backup. Okay, different versions of a copy of the original. The last point, the final photographs that are accepted for publication will need to be sent as a batch to the publishing team. They will also need to be archived at the end of the project. Okay, so they also need to be stored together by the looks of it in a batch. Batch means together. Which of the following folder structures will most efficiently meet these storage, backup, and archival needs? Okay, A. This looks like it would suit the first point because we can clearly see that we have folders for each photographer. So we'd be able to know where each photo comes from. But if we have a lot of, say we have 100 photographers that have sent in photos, there's a lot of folders to go through, and especially I'm thinking for this batch, the batch that have been chosen for publishing. To get those photos out and send them to the publishing team, I would need to go into 100 different folders by the looks of it, because we have the original photographs, the working copy files also in here, and the final photograph files in here. So I'd have to go into 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 100, copy those out, put them in another folder probably, or send them separately. I'm not sure how it would work here. So this probably isn't going to be the answer. Let's go to the next one. B, we have photographs. We have originals, we have working, and we have final. By the looks of it, it doesn't show from our first point. We need to know where all the original photos came from. So this would be good, or in here, this folder structure would be good in here, but it's not. So this is probably not going to work either. Although it does solve the other issue that we had up here with the final folder and probably the working folder for the photos being easily accessible as a batch to send off to the publishing team. I could just copy this folder and send that off instead of having to go into each separate folder of each photographer. But again, the first point now, it doesn't work. I can't archive easily the photos, the original photos. C, we have photographs, we have each photographer, and we have then inside of each photographer folder we have originals, working, and final, and that's repeated again. So similar problem to A. I wouldn't want to be going into 100, it'd be more than 100 folders, because I'd have to go into photographer 1 and then into final, and then copy the final photo out to send to the publishers, and I'd have to do that 100 times. So this is probably not going to work either. Let's go to D. see if this works. So we have photographs, we have originals, and we have each photographer with original photos in there. So that's really good because this solves the first point, number one, which was we need to archive and easily identify the original images. So yes, check. Then they're working on files here. So that addresses the second point where they need to manipulate and back up these daily. That'd be easy to back up because that'd be a simple single folder backup and you wouldn't have to go into each folder to back each one up. And you would also be just backing up the working files and not original or other irrelevant files. And then we have the final, which is suited to this last point because then we would need to send the batch to the publishing team and they would be all together there and very easily accessible and easy to send to someone instead of again having to go into each folder of each photographer. So the answer looks to me to be D. There is some content or reading in our book based on this, which is at 146. So organizing and storing data, hierarchies, folder structure. But a lot of it should come through our experience in class, organizing folders in Drive, on the server, on your desktops, in your student drives, etc. So you can go through this and read it a little bit, but a lot of it should be common sense to us. Question 18. PMC, I think we've skipped a bit. So we have a bit of a case study here we need to read first. Two organisations, Pain Free Medical Centre, PMC, and Bushwalks for Over 60s, BOS, are reviewing their information management strategies. In particular, they need to update their equipment and procedures for backing up, managing and disposing of client and membership data. Currently, PMC backs up its database records to a set of 4 gig flash drives that is stored in the office. The office is open to all staff. That rings bells already. BOS backs up its files to an 8 gig flash drive. So we can assume that they're probably doing something similar here too. PMC, so the question 18 is, PMC needs a storage capacity of 20 gigabytes per day for its client data, while BOS only needs 5 megabytes per day. So that's a lot less than PMC for its membership data. Which pair of options will provide the best backup plan for both organizations? So let's look down PMC's column first. External hard disk drive stored offsite every Friday night. It's possible if the next 3 options are complete rubbish, then maybe this might be one. DVD stored on site. No. Why? Because the DVD, how much can a DVD store? Only a regular DVD, a non-dual layer, can only store about 4.5 gig, and a dual layer can store about 8. So they want to do 20. Plus, it takes a long time usually to write DVDs to disk, so it's not very efficient. So instantly, we probably can scrap off this whole B, even without reading this side of the BOS. Next one is on-site tape backup at the end of every day, tape taken off-site nightly. That sounds like a good option. D is 250 gig external SSD flash drive stored in office, open to all staff. So that's the giveaway probably here, but that might be an option too, but if we're having it open to all staff, that's probably not a good option. So instantly we can probably scrap B and D. That's without making any more assumptions. Let's go to and try and read the BOS side. A second, remember that they only need 5 megabytes per day. A second internal hard disk drive located inside the computer. Maybe, probably not. For 5 megabytes a day, you probably don't need that. It's not very secure either. It doesn't talk about anything about taking it off-site or locking that computer or having sort of restricted access on that computer. It's definitely not this one, read-only DVD. Definitely not. And so the next available from A and C is automatic backup to cloud storage, 1 megabits internet connection. That would definitely suit 5 megabytes a day. 1 megabits internet connection is sufficient for transferring that amount of data in a day. If that was 5 gigabytes, on the other hand, that probably would be an issue. But that sounds like a perfect solution. Just out of curiosity, we'll read the last one. 32 gigabyte flash drive stored offsite every Friday night. Well, they don't need a 32 gig for starters, so that might have been a good option, but it's unnecessary. So we can then confirm it's definitely not D, it's definitely not B. It's probably, this one is the best one out of these two. So out of these two, it's probably going to be C and not A. So and the reason why we would choose tape is because it's sufficient enough to store that amount of data, and it's also been taken off-site nightly, so it has good procedures for keeping the data safe. We can read up more about this stuff on page 285 of our books. 285, and here are some of those backup mediums that you can read up on in this chart here: cloud, DVD, USB, external hard drive, and tape. Question 19. So we're continuing on with this case study of the PMC and BOS. Both organizations are aware of the need for privacy when storing data. Which pair of options will provide the best rule for each organization? Let's go down the first column for PMC. Require staff to log in to access medical records. That sounds sensible. Let's read the rest of the options first. Allow restricted access based on a staff member's role. That sounds sort of sensible too, maybe. Let's go to the next one. Allow open access to all records as stated in there. No, we probably do not want this to happen. So instantly, without reading the next BOS option, C is probably not our answer here. Allow restricted access based on a staff member's role. Yes, that sounds familiar. B and D, they are the same. So that's probably a hint that's probably going to be one of these two. Let's go and read the BOS then. Or actually, let's require staff to log in to access medical records. This sounds better because we don't want all staff. Just because I have a login doesn't mean I should have access to that sensitive information. So it's probably going to be B or D in this situation. Let's get rid of this one. So if I only have to read B or D, let's read those two. Allow any member to print a list of all members' records. No, that's definitely not going to. We shouldn't allow that. So having eliminated all the options, it's probably going to be D. Allow only the secretary and the treasurer to be able to log into members' records. Yes, that sounds fair. So without even reading the rest, I would go with D. Let's read them just out of curiosity. Allow open access to all members' records. Definitely not. So then that would confirm it's definitely not A. Require members to log in to access members' details. Let's assume that would be for all members and all details of all members. So no, that's probably not that one either. So cross all that one off, and of course we cross that one off because that's a no-go. So the answer we can confirm is D. For question 19 in our books, there is some stuff on page 170 of our books. So all about the data security, the physical security. I think we referenced this page before from one of the previous questions too. So it just shows that there is a bit of emphasis on you being able to know all this stuff under data security and these major headings for the exam. It's very important. The last question for the multiple choice is question 20. PMC has decided to replace its current backup strategy with cloud storage. It's aware of the need to dispose of data when clients' records are no longer required. PMC has a number of options. One is crush the old flash drives and place them in the garbage. That would definitely be suitable. Delete backup files from old flash drives before reusing them? No. There's a possibility that you could restore those files using special software, or there are other techniques without properly formatting the flash drive using zeros or writing zeros to them, or using a wiping utility. Then that data could potentially be restored from those flash drives. Number 3, delete data from the cloud storage that is no longer needed. If we're assuming that nothing else is happening, then probably not this one either. This one's probably not safe, because similarly, that data that is deleted on the cloud storage will probably be restorable via some sort of recycle bin, or even physically on the drives in the data center. So if the data center who is storing your cloud storage stuff, if they change hard drives, or if their servers are stolen or something like that, then they could potentially retrieve or restore your deleted data. So it's probably not this one. Number 4, ensure that the contract with the cloud company requires it to dispose of the data PMC no longer needs. So that sounds pretty sensible. I would say probably 1 and 4 are the most sensible here of these 4 options. Number 1 is if we're physically crushing the drives, then it's practically impossible to restore that data from those drives. So the question is, which pair of options should PMC choose to ensure old data is disposed of properly? Well, we already know we've got 1 and 4 here. So let's just go through them just in case. 1 and 3. We know 1 is probably a good one, but 3 is definitely not, so it's not this answer. 2 and 4. So we've got 2 and 4. 4 is, but 2 is probably not a good idea, so it's not that one. 1 and 4. So 1 and 4, the ones that we chose. Yes, it's probably going to be this answer. And the last one, D, is 2 and 3. 2 and 3 is definitely not together, is a good idea. Definitely not. So the answer is C. For question 20 on page 293 of our books, 293, there is some stuff about retrieval, storage, and disposal, the processes that should be followed. So I think we've referenced this page also before throughout this multiple choice section. So that's probably a hint that you should know going into the exam these processes, or the recommended processes for all these headings here.